So welcome to Strategic Marketing. I'm glad to see everybody made it out here today. So we got quite a bit of interesting marketing to cover today. So let's begin by talking about some of the concepts that we touched upon in chapter 1, like business definition. So we're going to talk about business definition. And we talked about this already. We're going to talk about the mission statement, goals, SWOT. So in terms of business definition, what is that? What is the business definition? When we say that we need to, as executives, as marketers, determine the business definition for our organization. Go ahead, Joe.
Like the business identity of what business they want to be in and what they do. That's what we do.
Yeah, so you guys got what Joe said? So basically we're looking at the scope of the organization's operations. What is the scope of our business? What is it that we do as an organization? So, do you remember we talked about the Encyclopedia Britannica?
Yes.
And we said, well, this is interesting. You know, the Encyclopedia Britannica, they're known for having dozens of books. If you go into somebody's home, it's not uncommon for you to see 3 dozen or more volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica on a bookshelf. Takes up an entire bookshelf. Well, in terms of their business definition, at one time they thought that their business was what?
Books.
Books. That they were in the business of selling books. But as technology advanced and they changed the method in which they deliver that information, they redefined their business. They said in terms of our business definition, the scope of our organization, what is it that we do as an organization is provide information so that in terms of their business, they're in the business of providing information, not selling books. What about, we talked about Sony. We said, what is it that Sony would use to define their business? Is it that their organization operates to produce MP3 players or TVs? And we said, no, actually, they produce a lot of different electronic products. And to say that they're a company that produces televisions is very narrow. We said a broad definition would be appropriate for them. What would that be for Sony in terms of the scope of their operation? That they're an electronics company. So in terms of the definition of their business, how would they define their business? Well, they're a company that markets electronics worldwide. This is particularly important because depending on how we define our business as an executive, that's going to determine our competitive set. That determines who our competitors are, who our direct competitors are, and who our indirect competitors are. So take, for example, McDonald's. A very important strategic decision that has to be made is the business definition for McDonald's. So we start with this topic, business definition, because it's so critical that it informs a lot of our other decisions. So take McDonald's, for example. Is McDonald's in the business of selling hamburgers, or is its business fast food?
I thought they were in the business of making burgers.
So it's a strategic decision. We could say that their scope of operations is in selling hamburgers. Now, if that's the case, then who are their direct competitors? Wendy's,
Carl's Jr.
Carl's Jr., Burger King, White Castle. Those are their direct competitors. Why? Why are those all direct competitors for them? They all sell burgers. Now, if we say, you know something, Coach? I think that in terms of the scope of their operations, I would define their business as a fast food provider. Now, if that's the case, now who would we say their competitors are? Besides the ones that we already mentioned, now who enters that competitive set that we didn't mention before? Subway sandwich shop, KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken. What else? Chipotle. Anything else? Taco Bell. Nobody buys Taco Bell? They can't have Taco Bell? No? So do you see how we define the business is of great strategic importance?
I'm sure I'm mixing this up, but part of the homework was, I believe, using the brand that they built on to establish more products. Could you even go so far as saying that McDonald's was a hamburger company, built up their reputation, and then use their brand in a sense to add towards the other products that they created?
So what Joel is talking about is a line extension. We could say it's a line extension, or would you say it's a brand extension? But quickly, but we're going to get to that. But just quickly, what is your initial thoughts? What do you think? How many say brand? Raise your hand. How many say line? Oh, we're undecided. So the McDonald's brand. We're taking the McDonald's brand, if we stick with the idea that, like Connie said, they were originally a hamburger company. They originally sold hamburgers, but now Joel is saying, but now they don't just sell hamburgers. See, Connie is saying they sell hamburgers, and they sell cheeseburgers, and they sell bacon cheeseburgers, and they sell Southwestern hamburgers. Those are all hamburgers. Those are all line extensions, but different flavors. Some with cheese, some with bacon, some with barbecue sauce. Now we're saying, Joel brought us here 2 hours early, but Joel brought us here to the point that, but what about the fact that now they sell chicken, and they even sell coffee, and all these other products? So the question is that a brand extension or a line extension? Go ahead,
They
Elena.
also have like McDonald's coffee shop, so technically it's still a brand extension because they're still go under McDonald's brand. So it's a new product, but it's still a brand of McDonald's.
So I agree. I think that selling coffee is a brand extension because it's still McDonald's coffee. Whereas what I was suggesting before about the different types of hamburgers, they're all hamburgers. So they're line extensions. We're just extending that line of hamburgers. Now we're saying we're taking our brand into a different category. Like what? Coffee. That's an entire different category from hamburgers. And now we're talking about who are our competitors. None of these you mentioned before. You specifically didn't mention any of these before. Now we're saying Starbucks would have to be a competitor. And Dunkin' Donuts. So the definition of our business is a critical decision. And a lot of other, Kimberly says a lot of other small coffee shops as well. So that's going to define our competitive set. Ariel?
I'm just confused about what defines each, because it kind of sounds like they're kind of merging.
What defines a brand extension or a line extension?
Yeah, it seems like, it seems like it could be either.
Well, a line extension is when you extend your brand into the same category and you introduce more flavors of the same product.
So
But a brand extension is when you take your brand into a new category. So now instead of just selling, let's say, candy, now you're also selling ice cream. Or now you're also selling toothpaste.
Okay.
So the brand is taken into a new category.
So What about hamburgers and cheeseburgers?
So those are line extensions. So those are all,
Chicken, once you introduce chicken, then it's brand extension.
right,
Okay.
in that case. So take, for example, Campbell's. So most notably, they're known for soup. So if they have minestrone soup and chicken noodle soup and all these other flavors of soups, those are all line extensions. They're all still in the soup category, and we're just extending the brand, right, we're just extending the line, rather, into those other flavors, into those other types of soups. Red pea soup, cow foot soup, all of those, right? Now, if you take Campbell's into a different category other than soup, then you're extending your brand. Now you're taking Campbell's into something other than soup. Like what?
Pasta sauce.
They make like waffles.
Prego.
So Prego is a good example, except they didn't use the Campbell brand. What did they do? They introduced a new brand. So we're going to talk about that. What are some of the other strategies besides line extensions and brand extensions? But does that clear that point up, Ariel?
Yeah.
Okay. So what about the mission? What does the mission do? What is the purpose of the mission? So what are they in business for? What is the purpose of the organization? And it complements the business definition. So the mission does complement the business definition, and it also includes some aspects of the vision. Where does the company anticipate themselves being in the future? Do we agree? Want to add anything to that in terms of what it is we're talking about when we say mission? Go ahead, Myles.
How it differentiates itself from other companies?
Yes, ideally, it could include some thoughts around what makes this company unique relative to competitors. You could include that in your mission. And your customer base, who you expect to purchase your product. You could include that as part of your mission. And importantly, one of the things we said is that that's something, the mission statement itself is very short. You could have other supporting documents that talk about your company, the history of the company, and other things that are important to you, such as the company values and so forth. But the mission statement itself is exactly that, a statement of the purpose of the organization, which includes where they see themselves in the future, who their competitors are. So it is definitely something that complements the business definition in a written statement form. Very often, though, the vision is something that's separate from the mission statement, but it's become more and more common to include visionary components in the mission statement. That wasn't always the case. It was always very distinct to have a mission statement and a vision statement. Companies still do that, but sometimes what they do in their mission statement is they have some thoughts that anticipate where they see the company going in the future. Now remember, the statement is very short, so you have to choose your words carefully. There's only so much that you can include. But again, everybody in the organization needs to internalize that. Everybody needs to know what the mission statement is. Everybody, not just the president and the senior vice presidents and the vice presidents and the directors and the managers and the supervisors. Everybody needs to know what the mission is of the organization. So if anybody asks, if anybody comes through in the evening and somebody is cleaning up, they're vacuuming the carpet, somebody should be able to ask them and say, hey, what is the mission of your company? Everybody should be able to say that.
Unless it's a subcontractor.
Everybody should know. We talked about goals. The goals is what takes the mission and transforms it into measurable results. So the goals transforms the mission, what it is that we said we do, our purpose, the scope of our organization, the vision, it takes that and it transforms it into results that we could measure. We said there's 3 types of goals. What are they? What are the 3 types of goals? We're going to talk about some examples of those, but we said we could classify goals 3 ways. What are they? You know, production is one. Financial. Luis says financial. And the third one, this one you gotta get. Marketing. So, what are some examples? So if you get that on the wrong on the exam, I mean, there's only so much coach can do to help, right? So marketing is one of the ways that we could classify goals. So some examples of goals would be to increase sales, $20 million. So importantly, we didn't just say we want to just increase sales. We want to increase sales by, I said what? A measurable amount, $20 million. We want to improve profitability, $5 million. It's important that we have a criteria that's measurable. We need to know if we achieved our goals or not. Do you agree? What would be another example of a goal?
Customer satisfaction, increasing customer satisfaction.
Absolutely. Luis says improving customer satisfaction, 20%. So of course we want to improve customer satisfaction, but we need to challenge ourselves and our team, the organization, that overall we want to improve customer satisfaction 20%. Go ahead, Merlin.
Maintain current market share.
What was that?
Maintain current market
Maintaining the current market share. So if our market share is currently 22%, our goal could be to maintain it at 20%. Or it could be to increase our market share by, let's say, 5 points. Market share, we said, is very important. Market share is very important. Why? Because it gives us an idea of our performance relative to competitors. Isn't that right? Because remember we said, if we sell 50,000 cartons of ice cream, we could still have a very nice business. We sell 50,000 cartons of ice cream a year. But we said that we don't know really how successful our company is. We don't really know how well we're doing until we compare our performance to competitors in the category. So when we find out that the volume of the entire category is 500,000 cartons of ice cream, that tells us that we have a market share of what? 10%. Not bad. Not bad. It's not 50%, but now it puts it into perspective for us. So probably we're not the market share leader unless it's a very highly fragmented market, which means that we could have 10% and there could be 100 other companies that each have 0.5% or 0.75%. That would be a market that's highly fragmented. Or the market could be highly concentrated, which could mean that maybe only 5 competitors control 80 to 100% of the market. Like in wireless communication in the United States, we said that's a highly concentrated market. Why? Because AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, what am I missing? Those 4 alone control at least 80% of the market in the US. That's an example of a highly concentrated market. And importantly, that's significant because that means that rivalry in that market is intense. And usually there's going to be fierce price competition as well. So it's not just, oh, okay, that's interesting. It's a highly concentrated market. But like in the dog food market, right? We know that what, 5 competitors in the dog food market control like 80% of the business in the United States. Is that right? Does that sound familiar to anybody? I see a lot of you guys captured that. That's good. But importantly, it means that competition is going to be very intense. SWOT. So I know that everybody knows that SWOT is an acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, my expectation for our team is that you're going to be able to prepare half a dozen SWOT analyses this semester. So every case that we do this semester, so on average we're doing a case study every other week. We have a written assignment every Wednesday, but we have a case study that's due on average every other week. For each case, you need to prepare a SWOT analysis. So you all know what the acronym is? You all know what it stands for? So when you go on an interview, I want you to be able to tell the interviewers that not only do you know what the acronym stands for, but be able to tell them and show them that you've done half a dozen SWOT analyses. That's going to be impressive. The first one is going to be a little bit challenging. The second one is going to be easier. The third one is going to be a lot easier. So as you get experience preparing the SWOT analyses, it's going to be a skill that you've developed. So keep that in mind when you're preparing the case analysis, that you should prepare a SWOT analysis. It doesn't need to be in diagram format and using colors or anything fancy. All you need to do is list, like we have here, strengths, and then some key bullet points as to what are the strengths of the organization, for example. What are the weaknesses? So the format, don't be intimidated by thinking that there's some kind of format requirement that requires creativity on your part. It's just this. Strengths, list 3-4 bullets. Weaknesses, list some more bullet points. What do we say an example of some strengths would be? If we're looking at a company, what might we expect to find as a strength for a company? What would be an example? The management team. So having an experienced management team would be a strength for a given organization. Is it possible that some organizations have management teams that are not experienced?
Yeah.
Yes, of course. They may not even have experience in that particular industry. Yeah, we could talk about that for a long time. What else? What would be another one, Elena?
Product? Depends on if they have a special product, which no other company has.
So if they have a unique product, absolutely, that could be a strength of the organization. So first to market with a product, or have a product that's unique relative to other products in that category. Even if it's not the only one or the first one, it's still unique relative to the competitors.
I was going to say marketing.
Their marketing could absolutely be a strength. So if they had our team on the job, I would say that would be a strength. Absolutely. Because you guys are awesome. Best students ever. Right? Caroline?
Yeah.
Travita? Best students ever. You run teams. What else? Another strength?
Research and development.
Yes, the research and development. So some companies spend a lot of money on research and development, some don't. So if you're spending a lot of money on research and development, absolutely, that could be a strength. Merck Pharmaceuticals usually spends about $30 billion a year on research and development. So that's certainly something that we would consider a strength. What about in the dog food industry? How much do they spend on research and development? So some companies might spend a significant amount of money on research and development, and some companies not. Those companies that are investing in research and development, those companies would indicate that as a strength for their organization. Another example? What about, go ahead, Jimmy?
Large cash reserves.
Cash on hand? Absolutely. So also having a relatively low debt to equity ratio. So I was going to say low debt to equity ratio. That means the amount of debt that you have relative to equity is low. So you don't have a lot of debt financing. You don't have a lot of bonds outstanding, you finance the company through stocks, through equity. So why is that important? Well, stocks, you don't need to repay. The money that you receive by selling a stock, you don't need to repay ever. You don't need to pay interest. You don't even need to pay dividends on stock that was issued by your company. Bonds, the reason why we look at the level of debt that we have, why we consider that to potentially be a strength or a weakness, is because if you issue bonds, that's a debt of the company. You have to repay that money. And not only do you have to repay it, but you have to pay interest. You have to pay interest. It's not an option. You could pay dividends, you could not pay dividends. But for debt, you need to pay interest. And for some companies, when they have a lot of debt, their problem is servicing that debt, which means they can't make the interest payments. So when they borrow a lot of money, they have to pay a lot of interest. And they may not have, what Jimmy mentioned, the cash to be able to do that.
Recently, I read an article about how Apple was issuing bonds out, and they were selling bonds. Right? But they were selling bonds to get more cash to buy back stock, and buying back stock, they saved money because the interest on the bonds was less than dividends they were paying on the stock. So I found that quite interesting.
Yeah, that happens. Companies do that. It's not uncommon for companies to buy back their own stock.
But they did that while issuing bonds. So yeah.
And one of the reasons that a company would do that is what? Why would a company buy back its own stock?
So the revenue
To resell at a
per
higher
share goes up.
So the earnings per share is going to go up? Anything else?
We sell it for a higher price.
Well, what happens to the stock that they buy back? Becomes treasury stock, right?
Yeah, sure.
Stock that the company holds.